September 12, 1942. The operations room at U-boat command headquarters in Lorient, France. Admiral Dönitz stood before a massive map of the Atlantic Ocean, studying red pins that marked recent kills. Each pin represented an Allied merchant ship sent to the bottom, each one a small victory in what Dönitz believed would be Germany's path to victory. His subordinates had just delivered the monthly report, and the numbers seemed to validate everything the Admiral had promised Hitler. 601 Allied ships totaling over 3 million tons had been sunk in the first 8 months of 1942. The Wolfpacks were bleeding the British Empire white, cutting the maritime lifeline that connected Britain to the world. Dönitz's lean face showed no emotion as he absorbed the figures, but inwardly he was calculating, always calculating. At this rate, he told his staff, Britain would be on its knees by the end of the year. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. But there was something in the intelligence reports that troubled him, something his analysts kept mentioning, but that he'd dismissed as Allied propaganda. American shipyards, according to multiple sources, were building cargo vessels at impossible speeds. The reports claimed ships were being launched in weeks, not months. Ships assembled like automobiles. Ships produced on assembly lines by workers who'd never seen the ocean. It was absurd. Shipbuilding was a craft refined over centuries, requiring skilled workers, precise measurements, months of careful construction. The idea that Americans could mass-produce ocean-going vessels like Ford built Model Ts was laughable. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Yet the pins on Dönitz's map told only half the story. What the Admiral didn't yet fully comprehend in that autumn of 1942 was that he was fighting not just the Royal Navy or the US Navy, but American industrial capacity itself. And that capacity was about to demonstrate something unprecedented in naval history. The Germans were winning tactical victories while losing a strategic war they didn't yet understand they were fighting. The roots of this industrial revolution at sea stretched back to late 1940, when Britain faced a shipping crisis that threatened its survival. German U-boats and surface raiders were sinking British merchantmen faster than British shipyards could replace them. By the end of 1940, Britain had lost over 4 million tons of shipping. The island nation's imports dropped by a quarter. Food was rationed, oil stocks dwindled. Without American help, Britain faced starvation and economic collapse. President Franklin Roosevelt understood the stakes. In December 1940, he told the American people that the United States must become the arsenal of democracy. But democracy needed more than weapons. It needed ships to carry those weapons across the Atlantic. The British Empire's survival depended on maintaining the maritime lifeline, connecting it to resources worldwide. German strategy aimed to sever that lifeline through submarine warfare. The Battle of the Atlantic would be decided not by naval tactics alone, but by industrial arithmetic. Could America build ships faster than German U-boats could sink them? The British government approached American shipbuilders with an urgent request. They needed simple, cheap cargo vessels, built quickly in large numbers. They provided plans for a basic British tramp steamer design, a vessel that prioritized functionality over elegance. The American Maritime Commission took these British plans and adapted them for American mass production methods. What emerged was designated the EC-2SC-1 emergency cargo ship, but would become known to history as the Liberty ship. The Liberty ship was deliberately basic. 141 feet long with a beam of 57 feet, it could carry 10,000 tons of cargo at a cruising speed of 11 knots. The design was simple enough that shipyards with limited experience could build it. Everything about the vessel prioritized speed of construction over sophistication. The Liberty ship was meant to be built quickly, sail once if necessary, and be considered a success if it made a single Atlantic crossing. Traditional shipbuilding methods would never produce vessels fast enough to replace British losses. A conventional approach required skilled craftsmen to shape and fit thousands of components, each customized to its specific location in the hull. Riveting crews worked for months, assembling ships piece by piece on slipways. The British needed hundreds of ships within months, not years. Enter Henry Kaiser. He was a construction magnate who'd built dams, bridges, and highways across the American West, but he'd never built a ship. When approached about Liberty ship production, Kaiser applied principles learned from massive construction projects: break complex tasks into standardized, repeatable steps, prefabricate components off-site, train workers in specific tasks rather than requiring comprehensive skills, use welding instead of riveting to speed assembly, and most revolutionary, organize everything around a moving production line. Kaiser proposed building shipyards specifically designed for Liberty ship production. These wouldn't be traditional shipyards adapted for a new vessel. They would be purpose-built factories optimized for one task, producing standardized cargo ships as quickly as possible. The Maritime Commission, desperate for tonnage, gave Kaiser permission to proceed. Construction began on Kaiser's Richmond, California shipyard in December 1940. By January 1942, the first Liberty ships were sliding down the ways. Other shipyards across America joined the program. 18 yards from Maine to California would eventually participate, building Liberty ships according to identical plans using standardized components. The production method was revolutionary. Traditional shipbuilding assembled the vessel on the slipway from keel to superstructure, with each component fitted in sequence. Kaiser's shipyards prefabricated major sections in shops away from the slipway. Entire bow sections, stern sections, deck houses, and hull sections were built separately, then moved to the slipway where giant cranes lifted them into place. Welders joined these massive prefabricated sections in days rather than the weeks or months traditional methods required. Workers needed training, but not the years of apprenticeship traditional ship crafts required. A woman who'd never held a welding torch could learn to weld Liberty ship sections in weeks. Men and women who'd never seen a shipyard mastered specific tasks. The workforce expanded from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands. By mid-1943, over 650,000 Americans worked on Maritime Commission contracts, most of them in newly built West Coast shipyards. The first Liberty ships took over 200 days to complete from keel laying to launch. This seemed impressive compared to traditional methods, but it wasn't fast enough. The Maritime Commission pushed for speed improvements. Shipyards competed against each other. Managers studied production bottlenecks. Engineers refined techniques. Workers became more skilled. Production time dropped steadily. By early 1942, average completion time had fallen to 150 days. By mid-1942, to 100 days. By early 1943, to 60 days. At peak efficiency in late 1943 and early 1944, Liberty ships were being completed in an average of 42 days from keel laying to launch, with just 30 days actually spent on the slipway. Back in Lorient, German, naval intelligence was tracking these developments with increasing concern. Reports from agents in neutral countries, interrogations of captured seamen, and analysis of equipment serial numbers all confirmed the same disturbing picture. American shipbuilding capacity was expanding at rates German analysts found difficult to credit. In January 1942, U-boats sank 50 Allied merchant ships, but in that same month, American shipyards launched 34 new vessels. In February, U-boats sank 73 ships, while American yards launched 51. In March, the Wolfpacks achieved their greatest success, sinking 95 ships. But American shipyards launched 73 vessels that month, and the pace was accelerating. Admiral Dönitz's staff presented him with projections based on current American production rates. If these figures were accurate, America would achieve parity with German sinking rates by summer 1942. By autumn, American construction would exceed U-boat kills. The entire strategic basis of the U-boat campaign, sinking ships faster than they could be replaced, would collapse. Dönitz refused to accept these projections. The numbers must be propaganda, he insisted. American merchant tonnage figures must include every floating vessel, not just ocean-going freighters. The Americans were counting fishing boats, coastal vessels, river barges. There was no possible way American shipyards could produce large cargo vessels at such rates. German intelligence was being deceived by Allied disinformation, but the evidence kept mounting. In April 1942, U-boats sank 132 ships, totaling over 834,000 tons, the highest monthly total yet achieved. It seemed like the climax of the campaign, proof that Germany was winning the tonnage war. Yet, in that same month, American shipyards launched 114 vessels, and in May, when U-boats sank 124 ships, American yards launched 151. The crossover point came in late summer 1942. In August, for the first time, American merchant ship construction exceeded total Allied losses to all causes. U-boats, mines, surface raiders, aircraft, storms, accidents, all combined destruction from every source fell below the tonnage, sliding down American slipways. And American production was still accelerating. By November 1942, when U-boats achieved their second highest monthly total, sinking 119 ships totaling over 731,000 tons, American shipyards launched 222 Liberty ships. Germany's highest achievement in a single month was exceeded by American construction from one ship type alone, not counting tankers, victory ships, or any other vessel type. Dönitz finally began to grasp what his intelligence staff had been telling him for months. American shipbuilding had achieved something unprecedented. They were producing ocean-going cargo vessels faster than the entire German submarine fleet could sink them. The Battle of the Atlantic, which Dönitz had expected to win through simple attrition, had become a race against American industrial capacity. And Germany was losing. The Liberty ship production statistics told a story of American industrial might that confounded everything German military planners had assumed about their enemy. 2 Liberty ships were completed in December 1941, 41 in January 1942, 51 in February. The monthly totals climbed relentlessly: 73 in March, 114 in April, 151 in May. By mid-1943, American shipyards were routinely completing over 140 Liberty ships per month. At peak production in December 1943, 147 Liberty ships slid down American slipways in 31 days. That was nearly 5 complete ocean-going cargo vessels launched every single day, 3 new ships for every 2 days on the calendar. The pace seemed impossible, yet the vessels were real, documented, photographed, and soon sailing in convoys across the Atlantic. The German naval staff conducted detailed analysis of American Liberty ship production, seeking some weakness or vulnerability in the system. What they found was systematic, distributed, resilient production capacity, immune to the disruption Germany might inflict. 18 American shipyards in 12 different locations, from Maine to California, from Baltimore to Portland, Oregon, all building identical ships. If one yard was disrupted, 17 others continued production. No single bombing raid or sabotage effort could significantly impact national production. The Luftwaffe couldn't reach American shipyards. U-boats couldn't shell them. German commandos couldn't sabotage them. American Liberty ship production was simply beyond German power to stop or even meaningfully slow. More troubling still for German strategic planning, the Liberty ship represented only part of American merchant ship construction. Tankers, victory ships, troop transports, and specialized vessels came off American slipways in additional hundreds. Total American merchant ship production in 1943 exceeded 19 million tons. This single year's American construction exceeded Germany's entire merchant fleet tonnage at the war's beginning. Dönitz understood naval warfare at tactical and operational levels. His Wolfpack tactics were innovative and effective. His leadership of the U-boat fleet was skillful, but he was fighting against industrial mathematics that made tactical excellence irrelevant. Germany needed to sink 700,000 tons of shipping monthly to overcome Allied construction rates. In November 1942, U-boats briefly reached this target. It was the only month in the entire war they would achieve it. After May 1943, when improved Allied anti-submarine warfare forced U-boats to withdraw from the North Atlantic, monthly sinkings never exceeded 200,000 tons again. But American shipyards continued launching Liberty ships at rates exceeding 120 per month through the rest of 1943 and into 1944. The German Admiralty's realization came in stages, each more devastating than the last. First came acceptance that American Liberty ship production figures were accurate. Then came the understanding that these vessels, dismissed as cheap and expendable, were actually effective cargo carriers. Finally came the terrible comprehension that Germany had no counter to this industrial avalanche. In September 1942, Admiral Dönitz received intelligence reports about a specific American production achievement that crystallized the hopelessness of Germany's position. The SS Joseph N. Thiel had been launched after just 10 days of construction at an Oregon shipyard. 10 days from keel laying to launch. German naval architects studied the documentation, searching for some explanation that would make this feat less extraordinary. Perhaps the Americans were counting only time on the slipway, excluding months of preparation. Perhaps the vessel was a hull only, requiring weeks more fitting out. The truth was more disturbing. While the Joseph N. Thiel's 10-day construction time did represent extensive prefabrication and was not typical of routine production, it demonstrated the potential of American methods. The vessel was completed, fitted out, and sailed into service. This wasn't propaganda or accounting tricks. American shipyards had mastered production techniques that allowed them to assemble ocean-going cargo vessels in timeframes that violated every German assumption about shipbuilding. 2 months later came an even more shocking report. The SS Robert E. Peary had been launched from Kaiser's Richmond shipyard after just 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes of construction. German intelligence officers initially refused to believe this figure. It was beyond impossible. It was absurd. A ship couldn't be built in less than 5 days. The steel alone couldn't be assembled that quickly, even ignoring all the mechanical systems, electrical wiring, plumbing, cargo handling equipment, and thousands of other components. But multiple independent sources confirmed the vessel existed and the construction time was documented. The Maritime Commission had publicized the achievement with photographs and detailed records. The Robert E. Peary wasn't even particularly unusual once launched. It served throughout the war, making multiple Pacific crossings, surviving Japanese attacks, delivering supplies to Allied forces. The vessel that seemed impossible had become routine. Dönitz and his staff understood what these records represented. The 4-day Liberty ship was a publicity stunt, a demonstration of maximum possible speed with resources concentrated for a single vessel. It didn't represent typical production rates, but it proved that American industrial organization could achieve speeds beyond anything Germany imagined possible. If American yards could build one ship in 4 days when motivated, what could they achieve when that organizational capacity was applied to routine production across 18 shipyards operating continuously? The answer arrived in monthly production statistics. By late 1943, American shipyards were maintaining production rates of 1 Liberty ship every 17 days averaged across all yards. Oregon Shipbuilding, the most efficient yard, sustained a pace of 1 complete vessel every 17 days continuously throughout mid-1943. This wasn't sprint performance. This was marathon pace maintained month after month. German U-boat crews began encountering Liberty ships in combat with increasing frequency. The vessels were slow, making them vulnerable targets. They were unarmored and relatively easy to sink. A single torpedo could send a Liberty ship to the bottom. But destroying individual ships meant nothing when dozens more appeared every week. U-boat commanders reported sinking Liberty ships only to encounter different Liberty ships in the same convoy. They sank ships in one convoy and encountered more Liberty ships in the next. The realization spread through the U-boat fleet that they were fighting against numbers, not naval skill. One submariner compared it to fighting against the ocean itself. You could sink individual ships, just as you could empty individual buckets of seawater, but the sea remained. American production had achieved a scale where individual losses became irrelevant. The Allies could lose ships indefinitely and still maintain growing convoy capacity. By early 1943, the strategic situation had become mathematically hopeless for Germany. In May 1943, improved Allied anti-submarine warfare achieved a devastating victory. 41 U-boats were sunk that month, more than in any previous month of the war. Dönitz withdrew his submarines from the North Atlantic, conceding that continued operations would simply waste boats and crews without achieving meaningful results. But even if the U-boat campaign had continued achieving 1942 success rates, the tonnage war was lost. American merchant ship construction in 1943 totaled 19.2 million tons. U-boats sank 2.6 million tons that year across all theaters. American construction exceeded total German sinking capacity by more than 7-1, and 1943 represented only the middle period of American production. Shipyards were still expanding, production techniques still improving, output still accelerating. The Liberty ship program would ultimately produce 2,710 vessels between 1941 and 1945. This represented 29 million tons of cargo capacity, roughly equivalent to Britain's entire pre-war merchant fleet. America had replaced Britain's peacetime maritime capacity in emergency wartime construction, while simultaneously maintaining its own merchant fleet and building hundreds of other vessel types. The human cost of this production miracle was substantial, but revealed American industrial depth. Over 650,000 Americans worked in maritime commission shipyards at peak employment. These workers came from everywhere. Housewives who'd never worked outside the home learned to weld. Farmers mastered crane operation. Teachers became electricians. African Americans found opportunities in skilled trades previously closed to them. Women comprised significant portions of shipyard workforces, performing jobs that had been exclusively male before the war. The social transformation paralleled the industrial transformation. The desperate need for workers broke down barriers that peacetime prosperity had maintained. Rosie the Riveter wasn't just propaganda. She was real women, wielding real welding torches in real shipyards, building real ships that carried real cargo to win a real war. The Liberty ships represented not just American industrial capacity but American social capacity to mobilize every available worker, regardless of gender or previous experience. Tragically, the work was dangerous. Shipyard accidents killed thousands of workers during the war years. Falls from scaffolding, machinery malfunctions, welding accidents, and explosions claimed lives in defense plants across America. The most catastrophic incident occurred at Port Chicago, California in July 1944, when the Liberty ship SS E.A. Bryan exploded while being loaded with ammunition. The detonation, equivalent to 2,000 tons of TNT, killed 320 sailors and civilians. But even catastrophic accidents didn't slow production. The yards mourned their dead and continued building ships. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. For the German Admiralty, watching American production statistics accumulate was like watching an execution in slow motion. Each monthly report brought more devastating numbers. Each intelligence summary confirmed that American capacity exceeded German estimates. Each captured document revealed organizational sophistication that Germany couldn't match. In late 1943, German intelligence obtained detailed information about American shipyard organization that explained how such production rates were possible. The documents described prefabrication techniques, workforce training programs, supply chain management, and production scheduling that represented systematic application of industrial efficiency principles to shipbuilding. Every aspect of Liberty ship construction had been analyzed, optimized, and standardized. The steel arrived at shipyards already cut to specification from mills across America. Components were manufactured by suppliers throughout the country and shipped to assembly points. Engines came from locomotive manufacturers, boilers from power plant suppliers, electrical systems from industrial equipment makers. The shipyards themselves were final assembly plants, joining components manufactured elsewhere into complete vessels. This distributed production model meant American Liberty ship construction employed not just the 650,000 shipyard workers, but hundreds of thousands more in supplier factories nationwide. A woman in Pittsburgh might make valve components. A man in Cleveland might manufacture propeller shafts. Workers in Chicago might produce electrical switchgear. All these components converged on shipyards where they were assembled into Liberty ships with remarkable speed. German shipbuilding retained traditional organization. Ships were built primarily in shipyards by shipyard workers using shipyard-manufactured components. This craft-based approach produced excellent vessels, but couldn't achieve American production rates. Germany lacked both the organizational methods and the industrial depth to mass-produce merchant ships. German shipyards in 1943 produced approximately 500,000 tons of merchant shipping. American yards produced 38 times as much. The strategic implications were devastating for German war planning. Every aspect of Germany's maritime strategy depended on assumptions that American production had invalidated. The U-boat campaign assumed Allied shipping losses would exceed replacement capacity. American production made that impossible. German commerce raiding assumed destroying sufficient cargo capacity would cripple Allied logistics. American production made cargo capacity effectively unlimited. German strategic planning assumed wars were fought with finite resources that careful enemies had to husband. America demonstrated that sufficient industrial capacity made resources effectively infinite. Admiral Dönitz's memoirs, written after the war, barely mentioned Liberty ships. He wrote extensively about U-boat tactics, technological developments, crew training, and operational challenges, but he devoted little space to discussing the vessels his submarines encountered most frequently in the Atlantic. This wasn't oversight. It was the silence of a professional officer confronting a reality he couldn't change and didn't want to acknowledge. Dönitz understood by mid-1943 that the Battle of the Atlantic was lost. Not lost tactically, his submarines continued achieving kills throughout the war, but lost strategically through industrial mathematics. The Wolfpacks could sink ships but couldn't sink enough ships. American yards could build replacements faster than German torpedoes could destroy them. The arithmetic was simple and devastating. In September 1942, when Dönitz had stood before his operations map calculating British vulnerability, the Liberty ship program was already sealing Germany's defeat. The Admiral couldn't see it yet, but the outcome was determined by industrial capacity deployed thousands of miles from any battlefield. The war would continue for nearly 3 more years, but the Battle of the Atlantic was decided in American shipyards during 1942 and 1943. The Liberty ships themselves were unglamorous vessels. President Roosevelt called them dreadful-looking objects. They were slow, basic, utilitarian. They had none of the grace of traditional ocean liners or the power of warships. They were simply floating cargo boxes, designed to carry maximum tonnage with minimum sophistication. But these unglamorous vessels won the Battle of the Atlantic through sheer numbers. By late 1944, Allied merchant shipping tonnage exceeded pre-war levels, despite 3 years of sustained U-boat attacks. This remarkable achievement meant Allied logistics could support simultaneous campaigns in Europe and the Pacific while maintaining civilian economies. Food, fuel, ammunition, vehicles, aircraft, raw materials, replacement parts, medical supplies, everything modern armies needed flowed across oceans in quantities that overwhelmed Axis interdiction efforts. The German naval staff conducted post-action analysis of the U-boat campaign in late 1944 as the war situation deteriorated. The classified report acknowledged that American shipbuilding capacity had made German victory impossible, regardless of U-boat tactics or technology. The assessment noted that even if Germany had built twice as many submarines and achieved twice the success rate, American production would still have exceeded German sinking capacity. This conclusion represented professional military analysis accepting mathematical reality. Germany had fought against industrial arithmetic and lost. The bravery of U-boat crews, the skill of submarine commanders, the innovation of German naval engineering, all proved irrelevant against American shipyards launching 3 cargo vessels daily at peak production. The Liberty ship program demonstrated principles that would shape post-war American industrial power. Mass production techniques could be applied to complex products. Distributed supply chains could achieve efficiency impossible in centralized systems. Standardized designs enabled rapid production scaling. Worker training could create skilled labor forces quickly. These lessons, learned building emergency cargo vessels, would influence American manufacturing for decades. After the war, many Liberty ships continued serving in merchant fleets worldwide. Some remained operational into the 1960s and 70s. Their simple, rugged construction proved remarkably durable, despite being designed for 5-year service lives. The vessels, built to be expendable, outlasted the war they were built to win, testimony to American engineering practicality. Today, only 2 Liberty ships remain operational as museum ships. The SS Jeremiah O'Brien in San Francisco and the SS John W. Brown in Baltimore preserve the memory of the 2,708 sisters that served during the war. Visitors can tour these vessels, see the cargo holds that carried supplies to Europe, examine the steam engines that powered the Allied logistical effort, touch the welded hull plates that American workers assembled in weeks. The statistics that so disturbed German Admiralty intelligence remain staggering 8 decades later. 2,710 Liberty ships built in 4 years, average construction time declining from 250 days to 42 days, peak production of 147 ships monthly. These numbers represented industrial achievement unprecedented in maritime history and never since equaled. For Admiral Dönitz, the Liberty ship represented professional failure he couldn't overcome. He had commanded his U-boat fleet brilliantly. His tactical innovations were sound. His operational leadership was skilled. But he was fighting a war where tactics didn't determine outcomes. American industrial capacity determined outcomes, and that capacity exceeded German power to counter it. The moment of realization, whenever it came for Dönitz personally, must have been devastating. The entire U-boat campaign, years of planning and preparation, thousands of submariners trained and equipped, hundreds of submarines built and deployed, all rendered strategically irrelevant by American shipyards. His submarines could sink individual ships, but couldn't sink American industrial capacity itself, and capacity, not combat, would decide the Battle of the Atlantic. The captured intelligence reports that crossed his desk in 1943 told the story with brutal clarity. Liberty ships appearing 3 per day at peak production, American merchant tonnage growing despite sustained losses, Allied convoys increasing in size and frequency, the maritime supply line to Britain strengthening rather than weakening despite Germany's best efforts. The numbers documented Germany's strategic defeat in arithmetic no naval tactics could overcome. In May 1943, when Dönitz withdrew his submarines from the North Atlantic after losing 41 boats in 1 month, he was acknowledging tactical defeat driven by Allied anti-submarine warfare improvements. But the strategic defeat had occurred months earlier, when American shipyards began exceeding U-boat sinking capacity. The withdrawal simply recognized reality that mathematics had already determined. The Battle of the Atlantic continued until Germany's surrender in May 1945, but its decisive phase ended in mid-1943, when American production definitively surpassed German destruction. Submarines continued operations, achieved occasional successes, sank additional ships, but these were tactical actions in a strategically lost campaign. The tonnage war was over. America had won through industrial capacity that Germany couldn't match, couldn't counter, and couldn't even fully comprehend until too late. The Liberty ships sailed on, carrying the cargo that sustained Allied operations worldwide. Each vessel represented American industrial might translated into floating transportation. Each convoy demonstrated that democracies could mobilize resources as effectively as totalitarian states. Each successful Atlantic crossing proved that free people working voluntarily could outproduce slave labor and coerced workers. German propaganda had insisted democracies were weak, divided, incapable of sustained effort. The Liberty ships refuted this propaganda with physical evidence. Democratic capitalism had produced vessels faster than authoritarian militarism could sink them. Free workers had outproduced regimented workers. Market economies had exceeded command economies. The ideological assumptions underlying Nazi worldview crashed against reality of American shipyards launching 3 freighters daily. For the thousands of merchant mariners who sailed Liberty ships across dangerous waters, The vessels were simply tools for a necessary job. They knew the ships were basic, slow, vulnerable. They knew German submarines hunted them. They knew mines threatened every convoy. They knew the Atlantic was killing ground where thousands of seamen had already died. But they sailed anyway, carrying the cargo that would win the war, trusting that if their ship was sunk, another would take its place because American shipyards never stopped building. Over 200 Liberty ships were lost during the war to torpedoes, mines, storms, explosions, and accidents. Each loss meant cargo gone, sometimes crews dead or missing. But each loss was replaced, usually within days. The yards built faster than combat could destroy. The industrial base proved deeper than Axis power could exhaust. American capacity exceeded German comprehension and German capacity to respond. In the end, the Battle of the Atlantic was won not by any single convoy, not by any particular technological development, not by tactical brilliance or operational innovation, but by American industrial workers building ships, welders in Richmond, crane operators in Portland, shipfitters in Baltimore, electricians in Savannah. These workers, most of whom never saw combat, never heard a torpedo explosion, never watched a ship sink, won the Battle of the Atlantic through the simple act of building vessels faster than enemies could sink them. The mathematics were always simple. Build more than the enemy destroys, and you win. Build less, and you lose. American industry, mobilized for total war, achieved production rates that made Allied victory arithmetically inevitable. The Liberty ships represented this industrial superiority in physical form. They were arithmetic made steel, mathematics made ships, industrial capacity made manifest. When Admiral Dönitz stood before his operations map in September 1942, confident in German tactical superiority, American shipyards were already determining the outcome he couldn't see. The pins marking sunken Allied ships told yesterday's story. The Liberty ships sliding down slipways every day told tomorrow's story. And tomorrow belonged to the side that could build faster than the enemy could destroy. The lesson remains relevant 8 decades later. Industrial capacity determines outcomes in prolonged conflicts between industrial powers. Tactical brilliance matters. Technological superiority matters. Training and motivation matter. But sustained industrial production matters most. The side that can build more, longer, faster, wins, through attrition even against tactically superior opponents. The Liberty ships proved this principle, with evidence no naval officer could dispute. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.